In Luke 17:19, Jesus is talking to the 10 lepers and he says, your faith has made you well. Then in Matthew 9:22, with the woman with the issue of blood, Jesus also says, your faith has made you well. Then again in Matthew 9:29, with the 2 blind men, Jesus says, according to your faith, let it be unto you. And then Mark chapter 10, verse 52, with the blind beggar, Jesus says to him, go your way, your faith has made you well. Well, it's interesting here. He says, your faith, your faith, your faith, and your faith. So many times we think it's always just Jesus alone that these miracles took place. But here Jesus is drawing a conclusion and telling us that your faith, your faith, your faith has something to do with it. So what does your faith have to do with getting well or achieving things, receiving the promises? Stick around. We're going to talk about your faith. Welcome back. So we know that Jesus said that it was your faith that made you well. And he said that multiple times in the scriptures. So how does each person actually get faith? If Jesus said it's your faith, how do you get faith to begin with? So let me read Romans chapter 12, verse 3. It says, for I say through the grace given unto me to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly. Why? According as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. So we see here that Romans chapter 12 tells us that God is the one that gave us the measure of faith, and not just Christians, he gave every single person the measure of faith so that they could use it to be restored back to him, to receive salvation, to receive healing, to receive forgiveness of sins, to receive all the benefits and the blessings. We can't actually receive any of those things without using faith. So it's a good thing God gave us, every man, faith so that we could actually use it to obtain the promises. We also see that the word measure there, where it says God has given every man the measure. Well, the word measure there in the Greek is the word metron, and it's the required measure, even a limited portion, but it's the portion that's measured off for us. So God has given us the measure, and the fact that it says the measure in the King James is that it's the same measure for every one of us. I don't necessarily really like the translations of other versions where it says that he's given a measure of faith, because that means you could have a measure and I could have a measure, and they could be different measures. But here in the King James, I think is more accurate, where it says he's given to every man the measure of faith. So what is the measure of faith? Well, we know that Jesus told the disciples when they asked, hey, increase our faith, Jesus. Jesus said, look, if you just have faith the size of a grain of a mustard seed, you can actually move a physical mountain from one place to the next. So I've never seen anybody do that, and I didn't see the disciples do that either. So probably our measure of faith is a little less than a mustard seed portion, but as the Greek word there for measure, it is the required measure, meaning all that we need to be able to accomplish everything that we need to on earth. So what is faith? Now, faith is, in Hebrews 11:1, it says it's the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now, the word substance there is hypostasis in the Greek, and it means confidence. So we can read that now. Faith is the confidence, right? The confident foundation. And it also is defined as something that is real or tangible. And we also see where it says faith is the evidence, meaning the word evidence there is elikos, meaning it's a proof. Actually, that which invisible things are proved. And even just reading Hebrews 11:1 at the end where it says the evidence of things not seen. It doesn't mean the evidence of things that don't exist. He's saying it's the evidence of things that are just not visible to the world, to the naked eye. So it really means this is a real thing. There are things in the world, in the spirit world, that we do not see, but that we can obtain through faith. Faith is your confidence that proves the invisible. Luke chapter 17 shows us how to use our faith. So what are some ways practically, right, that we can use our faith? So we go to the scriptures, and in Luke 17:19, he's talking with the 10 lepers, and he says, so when he saw them, he said to them, go show yourselves to the priest. And so it was, as they went, they were cleansed. So what was their faith step? As they went. And it's interesting in this passage that there's the law of the leper. And the law of the leper basically stated that you must be declared healed first. Then after you're declared healed, you can then show yourself to the priest, which then he can provide atonement for you. Well, when Jesus told these 10 lepers, go show yourself to the priest, they're looking down at themselves saying, you know what, I still have leprosy. But if he said, go show myself to the priest, that means I'm going to be well by the time I get to the priest. So by faith, they turned away from Jesus and went toward the priest. And it says, as they went, they were healed. Matthew chapter 9, verse 22, with the woman with the issue of blood, it says, but Jesus turned around when he said to her, be of good cheer, daughter, your faith has made you well. And the woman was made well from that very hour. So what was her faith step? How did she use the faith that God gave her? Verse 21 says, for she said to herself, if only I may touch his garment, I may be made well. So she said that, believed that, and then she went out of her house and grabbed the hem of his garment. So that was an action step, a faith step that she took to be well. And Jesus said it was your faith that made you well. He didn't say it was him or his power or any of those kind of things, though we know power went out from Jesus. But how did the woman tap into that power? By faith. And so Mark chapter 10 also is a story of the blind man. And it says that, and Jesus said to him, go your way, your faith has made you well. That's verse 52. But if we back up just a little bit in verse 47 through 48, it says, when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out saying, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. So he's declaring right there who he believes Jesus really is, the Messiah, Christ. That's a faith step in itself. Then many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So you can see this story unfolding, and you can literally see the faith that's taking place in this blind man. So then Jesus says to him, go your way, your faith has made you well. So faith, your confidence is powerful. Your faith is a substance. It's a real tangible thing. And it brings those things that are unseen into the scene. Doesn't mean they don't exist. You're not creating something, but you're actually applying faith to a truth that already exists. So here are some things that Hebrews 11 actually tells us, that by faith, Noah saved his household and preserved mankind. By faith, Enoch was allowed to not see death, but actually just be taken up by God. By faith, the Israelites escaped death of their firstborn, right, through the Passover. And by faith, the Red Sea parted without faith. The Egyptians actually drowned. So the Israelites used faith. They crossed over. The Egyptians did not use faith, and they drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell flat. By faith, righteousness is worked. Kingdoms were captured. Promises were obtained. These are all in chapter 11 of Hebrews. And it begins to show us that there are many uses of faith. Faith is not just to be used for salvation, but faith is used for practical things in our life. See, this is by faith, the mouth of lions were closed. I mean, so if you were out in the wilderness and a lion comes up and he's roaring and wanting to eat you, you can use faith to stop the mouth of a lion. I know that sounds crazy, but this is what the word says in Hebrews 11. So by faith, violent fire was quenched. By faith, people escaped the edge of the sword, meaning by faith, they escaped death. And by faith, people who were weak were made strong. Interesting that they weren't strong to begin with, but by faith, they became strong. By faith, people turned away armies, and by faith, women received back their dead to life again. So there are so many uses of faith, and God gives us faith, and obviously we're to use it, right? He wouldn't have given us faith if we weren't intended to use faith. And faith is powerful. I mean, faith is doing all these things. And, we've got things that we need to accomplish as well, and we need to get things done. And we can use faith to do that. So it's interesting here that none of these things that we just discussed, the armies, the lions, all these things, none of these were accomplished by God's faith or by Jesus's faith. It doesn't say that. It's by their faith they did these miraculous things. So it was all done by your faith. So I want you to understand today that you have a faith, and you are to use it not just to receive salvation and forgiveness of sins, but you can use faith in practical ways. Talk about in your discussion today, talk about the stories where we discussed today. The 10 lepers, what was their faith step? That's question number one. Question number two, woman with the issue of blood, what was her faith step? Number three, the blind men, what were their faith steps? And discuss the process of that and what they did. And it wasn't just something they believed, but we know that every one of these took an action step to prove what they believed was true. And it was there available for them, just unseen. Their healing, their miracles were unseen, but they were very real. And by faith, that evidence came out and brought those into reality. So what other stories of faith from the Bible do you remember? Maybe the centurion who went to Jesus and by faith actually received healing for his servant. Wasn't the servant's faith, it was the centurion's faith, and it wasn't God's faith or Jesus's faith. It was literally, he said, the centurion's faith. And he talks about how great the centurion's faith was. And what about the Samaritan woman who went to Jesus begging for the breadcrumbs for her daughter, and then the four friends carrying the man to Jesus and breaking open the roof, right, so they would drop him down. And Jesus said, when I saw their faith. So faith can be seen. So I want you to be encouraged today that your faith is powerful. It will accomplish great things. Just apply it to the truth of God's word, and you will be blessed. Well, I hope you have a great discussion today. God bless, and we'll see you in the next video.